welcome to another episode of FreightFM, number 14. Today we'll be talking about produce season that's happening, as well as some fun things about Mother's Day that just occurred in flower shipments. But before we get into kind of the meat and potatoes of things, my name's Emily. I work here at Interlog, and today I'm joined by
Harry, also with Interlog. I work alongside Emily in the marketing department. And today we're ready to talk Mother's Day and produce season. So
yes, definitely fun stuff to talk about for sure. But to kind of begin, we'll talk about the North America produce season. Kind of going to give you guys a background of it. It typically starts in Mexico in early March, and it kind of slowly trickles its way to the southern parts of U.S. So kind of think like Texas, Arizona, Georgia, the Carolinas, Florida is a big place as well. And then around the start of Q2, so think early April, and it continues into the Northeast, the Midwest, the Pacific Northwest, around July and August into the fall time before it kind of ends due to temperatures starting to drop. And one quick note here, last year the fruit and vegetable market in the U.S. hit a whopping 66.7 billion, according to SkyQuest. So that's a lot. That number is expected to jump over 100 billion by 2031.
100 billion.
Yeah, so it's definitely a robust market. But Harry, you created this wonderful map of some of the produce happening throughout the U.S. Can you kind of tell our listeners more about it?
Yeah, and as you see on the screen right here, the produce season we're referring to in today's podcast, it mainly focuses on the southern U.S. And the West Coast, as opposed to normally, like in the fall, we'll say like harvest season, and we'll think of, the scarecrows are out and it's like, beautiful fall weather. That's mainly for the North U.S. So this produce season in the peak spring and summer, it's going to be in the southern part of the U.S. And you're going to see a lot more of a diverse scope of commodities. And as you can see on the map, we got grapes in California that peak through May through August. And then you got all the way over to Florida. You got oranges, peanuts in Georgia. And then, corn, all corners too, in Alabama as well. So what this ultimately creates is a lot of different markets, and it's not like shipping a blue t-shirt versus a red t-shirt. If you're shipping an avocado versus a grape, it may require different types of treatment, and that sort of plays into how shipments must be handled differently. And I think that it's great for Emily to come in and explain just how temperamental agriculture shipping is, as opposed to just regular dry freight. Like this requires some sort of different service option.
For sure. I think the biggest thing with shipping produce is they're perishable goods, and most of the time they're going to be shipped through refrigerated containers, also known as reefers. That way the temperature is controlled, and it makes sure the quality of the goods doesn't decrease. Of course, the longer it takes for the shipping process to happen, the chances are for the produce to spoil, and you don't want that because that you can lose money that way. And of course, if delays occur in the shipping process, the freshness of the goods can decline as well. I kind of think of it as the Goldilocks analogy, where you want to make sure the temperature of the shipment is just right. So you don't want the temperature to be too cold where the goods unnecessarily freeze, and you don't want it too hot where the quality kind of decreases. With that, of course, it can be more expensive to ship, due to the time-sensitive nature of these goods. So those rates are kind of more at a premium for sure. And actually, to kind of go on that point, talking about why rates and capacity change during seasonal shipping periods, not just during produce season, but back to school shopping or the holidays. A lot of it is due to the impact of supply and demand. So the demand for these goods increase, which then leads to more shipments being handled. This can kind of create a strain on the available capacity of carriers, so capacity can be limited. And then regarding rates, when the demand increases, rates also can, especially during these seasonal times. So it is interesting to see, for sure.
Sure, yeah. That said, those are obviously very important factors. If you're a produce shipper, is probably what people are thinking. But obviously, a lot of people, maybe people who are listening to this podcast right now, are like, "Well, I don't ship produce. How does this impact me?" So I was just curious, Emily, what would you tell someone who's listening to this that, "Hey, I ship toys. Like, I don't. Why am I concerned about produce season in the U.S.?"
Right, right. And I think it kind of goes with a lot of things, right? When you're not directly impacted or think you're impacted, you're like, why does this matter to me? But for example, um, when truckers move into areas that generally have a lot of produce shipments, so like Florida, for example, this time of year, citrus produce is a big thing. So when those truckers do move into those areas, they want to take advantage of those short-term rate increases. So this can have an impact on capacity all over, not just if you're located in Florida, but or not just if you're impacted by shipping produce or not. And so this can also increase rates for non-produce shippers who need their goods shipped. So it can impact everyone in a sense. And it's just interesting how something that you might not think you're directly impacted with can actually have some short-term impacts for sure.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I learned. It's like supply chain 101 is that all the links will find a way to. Nothing will ever, nothing separate from each other.
Right.
Yeah, so.
And also, I think this is a good time to kind of note different best practices for produce shippers and things to consider. And obviously, it's a situational and individual kind of basis. So what you think is best for your company and your shipments, definitely kind of think about that. But the biggest thing is prepare, prepare, prepare. Right now we are like in the midst of the traditional kind of peak produce season. But planning ahead, being flexible. Like as we know, like things in this industry don't always go as planned. And maintaining good relationships with your providers and carriers. Good relationships can go so far in any industry, really. And also, like being able to monitor and track your shipments. Does your forwarder have tracking and tracing capabilities? Just some things to consider when with your shipments. Even if you don't have any produce shipments, those are still good things to kind of keep in mind.
Yeah, and especially too if this in the case of produce shippers, if you're working with a broker, being able to have a reliable logistics partner who has connections with multiple reefer carriers and many carriers who not only does that provide enough capacity in case there's a shortage, but also that expertise you need just to make sure, as Emily talked about, the Goldilocks zone and making sure the cargo is handled right and properly. That's also something you want to make sure you have prepared for in advance.
Yes, for sure. And on that note, we'll kind of like move towards Mother's Day and flower shipments. So as some of you know, Mother's Day was this last Sunday. Big holiday, great time to celebrate. Hopefully you guys had some fun times over the weekend. I kind of wanted to talk about how much consumers are projected to spend this past Mother's Day versus last year. Official data from this year's Mother's Day is not out quite yet, but I kind of just wanted to talk about what some of the projections looked like. So this year, according to data from the National Retail Federation and Prosper Insights and Analytics, um, they are expecting Mother's Day this year to bring in 33.5 billion, which is a lot, but it's actually slightly down from the amount consumers spent last year, which was a record 35.7 billion according to their data. So big numbers for,
Yeah.
for that weekend.
Yeah, average consumer too predicted to spend 250.
I know. I
That's-
kind of asked myself, like, is that how much I spent on my mom
Yeah.
for Mother's Day? Maybe I didn't spend that much, but kind of on that note, I kind of want to explain like the flower transportation process and kind of what that entails. Before we do, another interesting data point by the NRF is 3.2 billion is expected to be spent on flowers just this Mother's Day. Like just
Wow.
on Mother's Day.
Just on the day.
Yeah. Which I mean, like, it is I feel like one of the more popular gifts to give on Mother's Day. But it's kind of just crazy to see how much is spent
Yeah.
daily on one commodity.
I remember last year too, it was a stat. It was about how many flower stems customs inspected. I don't know the exact number, but it was up in that large, like millions or something number.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's just, there's a lot that goes into these holidays. And even one where Mother's Day, like, you know, we sometimes only remember when it's a week before and we're freaking out like, oh shoot, I need to get a gift. So like that just goes to show that even some of these more minor holidays compared to like Christmas or Halloween, ones that everyone would know the supply chain is going to have some sort of pent up demand. These holidays as well can be tricky ones too. So and just as you know, they can bring in huge numbers as well as far as the numbers Emily shared, right? So these are billions we're talking about. So.
Yeah, and you know, like with the overall like flower shipment process, it has a lot of collaboration with a lot of parties. You know, from the very beginning with workers and farmers to wholesalers, airlines, cargo ships, traders, florists, and supermarkets, and honestly everyone in between. Like it's a huge collaborative process, and that is why having a care in handling protocol is crucial for flowers during this transportation process. You know, flowers are recommended to be cool before they go in boxes, and then even colder when they are packed. It basically, like, time is of the essence. Like, time is so important, and it's kind of similar to produce season, right? You know, you don't want your goods to be sitting for longer than they need to, because then the perishability and the freshness and the overall quality just decrease. And it's actually interesting because the majority of flowers are transported via air. You know, this time of year, those air shipments can see a little bump because of Mother's Day happening. So yeah, it's an interesting time in the industry, and it's kind of cool to see these different holidays and events that happen in the year, and just the impacts on like the supply chain process and all of that. But before we conclude, Harry, do you have any last thoughts on, you know, produce season or Mother's Day or anything else?
Well, you don't want to give your mother like weak flowers or like dead flowers. So yeah, it just goes to show like when you think of air freight, you think of reliable and like very fast. And,
Definitely comes at a more of a cost.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So yeah, but I think that again, like the title of this podcast is going to be April Showers Bring Me Flowers. So yeah, I think this kind of, you know, we talked about a little bit of a corner of logistics here that may not come to a lot of people's minds, especially if you're not a produce shipper or a flower or any sort of you know, agricultural commodities like that. But as we said, this can have a greater implication on the market. So yeah, thought we had a good chat here today about discussing that. So.
Yeah, let us know too in the comments or shoot us an email on your thoughts on this episode. If there's any topics you'd like to see us discuss and other guests on here for FreightFM, please let us know. Shoot us an email. But other than that, that includes this episode of FreightFM. Harry, it was a great chat with you. Had a great time. Hope you guys all enjoyed, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.